As someone who's been producing for over a decade, I've been into music all my life. My music's been featured all around the world, getting billions of views, streams, featured across tons of different platforms. There's a lot I really wish I knew earlier, right? Like anything in life, when you look back on it, you're like, dang, if I only knew these few things, I could have sped up the process of learning making music, getting the music out there, getting featured, and a lot more. So in this video, to save you a ton of time, I'm going to talk about the 5 things I wish I knew earlier before producing music. Number 1, samples are okay. Now this one has changed, I think, over the years. When I first started producing music, 2012 to be more specific, to timestamp it. I got into music though when, I don't know, it was maybe 8 or 9, so that was in like the 90s, right? But anyway, talking about when I started producing specifically, going hard into using DAWs and VSTs and all this kind of stuff. Samples, back in the day for me, I was heavily against. I'm like, well, I didn't make it, right? I didn't make it. A kick or a snare or a hi-hat, that's a little different, but like loops and samples, take splice sounds, is the perfect example of this. I was heavily against. I'm like, well, I didn't make it. It doesn't count. It's cheating. No. Now, I will say there is an interesting spectrum depending on who you talk to, and this could be like a whole other debate for a whole other video, and there's been a bajillion YouTube videos about this. Because like, say if you go to Splice Sounds, you go to a pack that has kits, meaning they're pre-made samples that are meant to be almost like mini songs in of themselves, and you take all the loops from those kits and use them. Okay, kind of depends, right? There is this gray area of like, did you actually make it or not? But at the end of the day, this is what I'm going to say. Samples are okay. And not only that, I encourage you to use them. Like my song I just released, at least at the time of this video, is called Cachaça. And I'm not going to lie, I think if I had to really sit down and think of it and remember the Ableton project off the top of my head, I'm going to say almost 100% of that song was samples that I didn't make. But the big thing is I did a lot of crate digging, did a lot of digging to find the right kind of samples. It's a very Brazilian style record. And so I wanted to have a lot of percussive elements. I wanted to have a lot of unique style world music elements that I couldn't really recreate on my own. It's not the kind of thing I'd want to make in Serum because I didn't want it to be very EDM-y if I'd word it like that. I wanted to have a more world music feel of organic instruments and percussive instruments and a lot more. And so at the end of the day, that's just one example, but at the end of the day, I think in the beginning, I was heavily against using samples, and looking back on that, it really held me back. That using samples, using loops, using one-shots, however you want to word it, can speed up the process of you making that song the way you want it to sound. And the interesting thing is sometimes, and this is what's interesting, is the pursuit of not using samples, in my opinion, can sometimes make it sound worse. Where if you have that perfect sample, that perfect loop from a pack, from Splice, from wherever, sometimes that's all you need. Using samples is not only okay, but it's encouraged. Number 2, mastering. This is a big one that I don't know why. I'm not gonna lie. I know this is still the vibe now, but it's funny. When I first started producing in like the 2010s, like I said, there's this weird thing where people, especially beginning producers, I feel like this might still be the case, get obsessed with mastering. I don't know why. I feel like it's almost like a rite of passage as a producer that you start learning how to make music and then you're like, whoa, mastering. It seems like this ethereal, epic, if I'd use that word, thing that you do at the end of your song, like, whoa, this song is good, but wait until it's mastered. But then you realize 2 things technically. 1, mixing is more important than mastering. You're gonna hear this a lot, especially if you just started producing, and it's true. Maybe it's not as sexy or as epic as it sounds. I don't know if it's like the word mastering, or I don't know if it's the appeal. I don't know what it is. I mean, I went through this phase too where I was like, dude, forget mixing, like mastering is where it's at. And the truth is, mixing's way more important. Mixing over mastering. And 2, you don't, if your song's good enough and you have a good enough mix, the master should be very, 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 very minimal. Sometimes non-existent. I listened to, I can't remember the guy's name, just give me now. He was on Excellent Sounds podcast, and he was saying how he actually doesn't even have a master chain at all. I think he just literally has a limiter. That's it. That's all his mastering chain is. So at the end of the day, mastering is, I think if you're making music in the right way, you're mixing it in the right way. And again, of course, maybe I'll do a video about mixing and all my techniques I use for mixing. Your master chain should be less and less. Like I think in the beginning, I used to have, oh my God, a whole rack of all this stuff for mastering. And I think, to be honest, I think most of it for me, I didn't even know what I was doing. I just thought maybe it looked cool. Maybe it was more of an ego thing. And then now I mainly have like a few things. Like that's it. Like if I had to be very, very specific on this video, I think I have like an EQ to do mid-side stuff, especially when it comes to low cutting the bass on the side. So just like an EQ. A light saturator at like 5%. I use like the a bit warmer preset on Ableton at like 5%. I look at like these sprinkles on the ice cream. Maybe an OTT, but I kind of feel that out. And then a limiter. I use a Pro L2. That's it. Maybe a fifth one. I don't know. Like it's that minimal. Focus way more on mixing than mastering. I don't know why, but again, if I had to go back and tell myself something, I'm like, hey, forget mastering. It sounds cool. It sounds epic. Very overrated. Very over kind of like, it's put on a pedestal. Let me put it that way. Stick with learning as much as you can about mixing. Number 3. Focus on one new thing every song you make. This is a big one. I feel like this is actually a good thing when it comes to life, not just when it comes to producing, but learning any skill. Because when it comes to producing, the whole like 10,000 hour rule, I think is actually underrated. I think it's probably more than that when it comes to producing, because you're talking about knowing music theory and knowing arranging and knowing composition, right? If you think of like rock bands, they'll make a song, but then give it to an engineer. They'll give it to a producer, and the producer will produce it, do all this kind of stuff when it comes to like, say, arranging it, taking the stems, taking the best takes, all that kind of stuff, produce it the right way. Then they'll give it to the engineer who will then mix it and master it typically. I mean, again, I'm oversimplifying that, but there's multiple people involved. But with you, you're doing all of it. You're doing the arranging, the music theory, the sound design, the crate digging for the samples. You're putting it together, so you're obviously producing it. You're then also engineering it. You're using reverb and saturation and compression and all this kind of stuff. And then you're mixing it and then mastering it. But we just talked about that. The mastering should be very minimal. But again, already explained that. But at the end of the day, you're doing a lot. And I think it'd be very overwhelming. And I remember knowing this feeling when I was getting into it, being like, whoa, there is so much more to this than I ever expected. I think especially if you've played an instrument, I used to think like, okay, like the difference between playing a song on a piano and writing sheet music. I looked at producing as writing sheet music. Like playing a song on a piano and writing that sheet music is the exact same as producing. I just pick a synth. I just pick an instrument. Oh yeah, maybe our drums and that's it. No, it is way more than that. Like I technically first started making music, if I word it like that, on a program called Finale, which basically made sheet music. This is what you use, like say, when I used to write quartets, so like say my saxophone quartet in high school, or if I was writing like a new piano song or something like that, I do it in Finale, which is just sheet music. Producing, whole other thing. And what I suggest is when you get into the rhythm of making a song after song, try to pick one thing and do almost like a deep dive. So for example, take like reverb. I'll just pick that as like one element of music production. Let's say you're like, okay, I use reverb. How am I going to really understand reverb? How do I understand things like, and I've done videos about this on this channel, parallel processing in reverb. So I have one dry chain, one wet chain. That way it's easier to, manipulate that wet chain however I want. A big pro tip that a lot of producers use, most of them, especially when it comes to vocals, is you sidechain the wet chain to the dry chain, right? And so that way the reverb only really comes in near the tail end of the dry end. That way the wet part of the reverb doesn't muddy up the mix in terms of the wet dry happening at the same time, right? One other thing. So what I'm saying is pick one thing like the reverb. And for me personally, I use the Ableton stock reverb. Don't use the Pro R or any other reverb, the hollow reverb, just the reverb in Ableton. Maybe you'd be like, okay, for this next song, all I'm going to do is try to get better at reverb. I really want to understand how reverb works. Let me watch tutorials. Let me understand, like I just said, about parallel processing with reverb and especially sidechaining within the parallel processing aspect of reverb. Why do I do that? Just try to understand that. Then maybe the next time you're like, I want to really work on music theory. Let me try to understand the circle of fifths, all this kind of stuff. Then the next time you're like, you know what? I'm going to really try to understand sidechain compression or compression in general. Then the next time, I'm going to really try to get better at sound design. Let me try to really do a deep dive into Serum, or in this case now Serum 2, and that kind of stuff. Pick one thing, because I feel like it can be very overwhelming. And I remember this feeling of trying to learn as many things as I could at once. In terms of being like, okay, let me try to understand X, Y, and Z, or like 5 things and try to get better at all of them. I do think it's better to pick one and just do a deep dive. Not saying you're not going to ever try to learn it or get better at that one particular thing again, but doing a deep dive is good because the truth is when it comes to making music and producing music, it is a lifelong pursuit, right? You're like, for me, I'm constantly getting better every time I produce a new song. I'm always learning. I think the one thing I mean this in kind of a funny way. I guess as like a side note, this is like another thing I kind of wish I knew that I'd experienced. I think this is true for a lot of professions where the better I got at making music, the more I understood how bad I am, right? Like in the sense that like, I remember when I listened to people like Tipper. In my opinion, Tipper is one of, if not maybe the best producer on the planet. I call it production porn. In the sense that if you know production, you understand it, Tipper is just mind-blowing. Same thing with Skrillex. I put them in the same category that when I started to listen to Tipper or Skrillex, I say back in the day, I'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. They're talented, of course. But then now when I listen to it, I'm like, whoa, this is way better than I ever expected. Like now I understand what goes into this, but I also understand, man, I suck. I didn't really understand how bad my song sucked until now. But again, it's taking one thing a step at a time, looking at it as a marathon, not a sprint. And every time you make a new song, pick one thing to get better at. Number 4, backwards deconstruction. This is by far the biggest one on this video. If I had to pick like the biggest one for me out of these 5, this is the one. And there's 2 ways you can do this. One is by downloading a project file, and 2 is by remaking it. So I'll get into this. What I'm talking about is basically trying to deconstruct your favorite artist or your style that you really like, which we'll talk about the next point. So keep this in mind. We'll talk about this next point and try to understand why they did. Why did they do this here? Why did they do that there? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? And fully kind of look at it and break it down backwards. Now, the first thing you can do, and this is something that I started to do, and it saved me, man, like light years when it comes to learning music and production, is download project files made by artists who are very, very good. Another thing is if you go to some sites that sell project files you can download, like Abletunes is probably the biggest one, where you go to Abletunes, you spend $20, and the crazy thing is you actually have the legal rights to the project file, so like you can't really release it. You have to change up the melody if you really wanted to, but you can download this pre-made project file in so many different genres, future-based to house to, they have hip-hop stuff, they have dubstep, whatever the genre is. And you can break down within the project file, like, oh, this is how they did this is how I did that. And they basically make their own songs that you can download and learn from. Another thing when it comes to Ableton project files or FL Studio, whatever your DAW is go on YouTube and literally search like Skrillex Ableton remake. There's a lot of YouTubers that will remake Skrillex songs or Diplo songs or I don't know, any other dubstep artists, basically different artists. They'll try to remake their songs. Like EDM Tips, I think, is one of the best ones, in my opinion. They give away their project files for free. You could download these and deconstruct how they did what they did. This will save you so much time because you can actually go in and see the routing. See how they did maybe, routing and busing. You could see the sound design that they did. You can actually, visibly see as well, like, oh, they did this and this with this kick snare. They did this and this with this. They did this and this with the samples. Like, you can really break it down. And I think this will save you immense amounts of time, especially if you're able to get, this doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't exist anymore. But back in the day, Splice, I don't know why they got rid of this. Maybe someone knows. Back in the day, Splice used to not just be Splice sounds or plugins. It used to also do project files. And famous DJs like Jaws, Pegboard Nerds, Henry Fong, Hardwell, I think, did this. They would release their project file on Splice, the entire thing, for you to be able to dig into. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm literally looking at Jaws' project file. The Jaws we all know, and I can see how he did everything. I'm like, this is crazy. And the amount of learning and knowledge I got, the tricks, I'm like, oh, wait, that's how we did this? That's so crazy. Amazing. I don't know why Splice doesn't do that anymore, but if you can just get remakes. And then the second thing, which is a very interesting one, and this is a big one too, and this allowed me to learn so much more. One big thing for me I learned a lot, is especially Moomerton, when I was learning how to produce Moomerton, because I love Moomerton, is take your favorite songs. For me, obviously, Dylan Francis is one of my favorite producers, especially most notably for Moomerton. And I would take one of his songs, put it in Ableton. So again, this is the full song, and I would try to recreate it the best that I could. As if someone said to me, hey, remake this song as close as you can. Like say, excuse me, you want to be like one of those YouTubers that, post an Ableton project file, for example. I would try to recreate Dylan Francis as close as I could, or Skrillex as close as I could. And here's the thing. I never got close. I'll be honest. I never got close. Like, I got maybe the rough idea, but, nothing crazily close. But here's the thing. My pursuit of trying to do it taught me a lot. I'm like, oh, so they do this synth pattern here. They use this percussive pattern here. This is how they time out everything. And so the two things I'm going to suggest when it comes to backwards deconstruction, which I think is the fastest way, in my opinion, to learn music production, is one, get your hands on any kind of project file in your DAW that is closest to the genre you want to produce. That's going to be the best way to go. Or two, if you're not able to, or let's say you just want to try another technique, get your favorite song and try to recreate it as close as you can. This will help you and speed up the learning process a ton. And last, but definitely not least, number 5, branding. Now, this is one that might not be a big thing to you, at least not yet. But if you start on the right foot, it's going to save you a tremendous amount of time. And this is not for everybody. It does depend on who you are. But I do want to mention this, especially in this day and age. Remember that whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, you are a business. And for somebody who got an accounting degree, I know a lot about business. At the end of the day, you are a business. Like, your name, like say Joe Schmo, is a business. Your product is your music, your performances, your merch, etc., etc. And here's the thing. When touring managers, when booking agents, when promoters, etc., want to start booking you for shows, I'm assuming, like say if you're producing, you're producing to make music, to book shows, perform out live, maybe be the headliner of EDC or Ultra or something. They want to know, how does this person fit in? Are they going to open for Excision as like a bass artist? Are they more on the hip hop side, so they're going to open more for Diplo? Are they more housey, so they're going to open for AC Slater? Like, where do you fit in? And one thing I'm going to suggest in the beginning is to start off making one type of genre, one type of feel. And I know there's this huge thing right now about being genreless, and most DJs now are. But here's the thing: most DJs got started making one type of music they got known for. And once you get to the point where you're big enough, you're booking shows, then they'll branch out. Because the biggest thing is that for promoters, the business side, the business people of the EDM world, they just want to know, can we sell tickets? Can we sell tickets? And a big thing they want to know as well is, can they sell tickets? So is your name big enough to sell tickets? But then also, how can we book you so that way the people of the crowd are satisfied? And I know this is not the kind of thing you would expect in a video like this. I'm talking about production, but this is vitally important. Because if like you're making tech house music, maybe you open for John Summit, right? Like, I'm just using random examples, but make sure the genre that you're making in general is roughly the same. I'm not saying you have to find your sound. I know that's a big thing a lot of musicians talk about. I think that's a bit overrated, to be honest, but I do think being in the same realm, at least in the beginning, is crucial. Absolutely crucial. Like, you hear this a lot, take on social media, pick a niche. When people come to me to be a YouTuber, I'm like, yeah, if you have a niche, that's way better. Like this channel, about making music. If you want to do gardening YouTube channels, whatever, having your niche when it comes to a musician is vital. Because if I mention different musicians, they all got started with a genre, got known for it, got a big enough name, and then start to branch out. Like Jaws, to use his name again, Bass House, Dylan Francis, Moombahton, Skrillex, Dubstep, John Summit, Tech House, Tiesto, Trance. The list goes on. I can mention tons of different artists. But if you look at Dylan Francis, he releases a lot of dubstep in house. If you look at John Summit, he's released bass music. If you look at Tiesto, I don't think he's done a trance record in forever, right? So if you look at a lot of these artists who are now so big, Skrillex is a prime example, they do multi-genre stuff. But here's the thing. They're big enough where they can get away with it. No matter what, like I said, they're going to sell tickets. Promoters know this. Touring managers know this. Business entities know this. But the biggest thing is they got big for that one particular thing that they got known for, and then they branched out. So especially in the beginning, with all the stuff I'm telling you, try to produce music within the same niche, the main genre, so people know what to expect. Even thinking from a listener's perspective. If let's say someone gets on Spotify, they listen to Joe Schmo, let's say you, and they're like, oh man, this is a banger tech house record. I'm loving this. They go to the next one that you're known for, and you're like, wait, this is a bass record. This is dubstep. These don't correlate at all. And to the next one is a funky glitch hop song. They're like, wait, this is kind of all over the place. I expected tech house, but now I'm getting dubstep. Now I'm getting funky glitch hop. Now I'm getting this. Now I'm getting that. Do the same thing and become known for it. And then if you want to branch out and do a little more multi-genre creative stuff, you can definitely do so. But in the beginning, make sure branding is vitally important.